2019, the chips are down, Microsoft is falling further and further behind Sony in the console wars. A new killer exclusive is the only thing that can save the Xbox brand. Thankfully, Wahoo Studios, creators of many Xbox arcade hits like Band of Bugs and the admittedly good World of Keflings, jump to the rescue with the sleeper hit, and more importantly, free One Leaves. This game has flown under the radar, to say the least. No Wikipedia page, its Microsoft purchase page hides the developer's name underneath a publisher that seems to have made nothing else, and the Microsoft Store page even lacks screenshots. Unraveling the mysteries of this game can only come from diving into the deep ends. One Leaves is a horror game, rather generously, although more accurately it's one of those layer of fear type walking simulator horror game, peppered lightly with puzzles. Interactivity is minimal. The nameless player, we'll call him Leaves, can sprint jump, although jumping is literally never used, and interact with context-sensitive stuff in the environment. Off the bat, it means the game has an uphill battle and really needs to deliver in other aspects. It doesn't, really. Puzzles comprise the barest minimum, just mashing on every interactable object until things work out, and the game really only has a failstate insofar as the game is timed. Beating the game in 8 minutes or less gives the good ending, and yes, I do mean 8 minutes, and anything above that gives the bad. As many of these walking sim type games do, it tries to crutch on an atmosphere to carry where the gameplay doesn't, so let's transition into that. The game is very asset flippy. I don't truly believe that they are flipped assets, but it gives off a certain vibe of cheapness. The dark lighting doesn't really give it an atmosphere, it just looks like an awkward attempt to cover up extremely weak visuals. Each area is pretty one note, whether it's the generic Unity engine school, hospital, or sewers. The game has very little that visually stands out besides its very clunky scares. The game leans into body horror, lungs, teeth, weird organs, and while I do have a visceral dislike of teeth stuff, it never gets to me for a variety of reasons. The timing seems off at every moment. You're never caught off guard because the weird stuff is so heavily telegraphed and often has this delayed response after you see it. Sound design is also rather lacking. Musical stings and Foley both fail to sell any impact a moment might have had, because they're so muted and generic. Credit where it's due, the narrator, Kmart Steve Blum, does a solid job at delivering the awkward lines he's been given, although this isn't enough. He introduces the beginning of the game and his notes on your placement of the 4 survivors between levels, hint at your pace for the good ending, but he likewise doesn't work well at setting up any of the suspense that the game would have needed to function. The game also runs really poorly for something so simple. Transitioning between sub-areas, entering vents, and lighting changes often seem to cause a large hang, and loading between levels is bizarrely huge for how small this entire game is. Each of this game's 3 levels lasts about 5 minutes at best. The school is the most fleshed out. Being stuck in a cage at the start builds some anticipation something might happen, and the race aspect almost seems like it might amount to something, but the illusion is pretty quickly shattered. There are effectively 2 puzzles in this area, separated by large swaths of nothing. No tension, no scares, no threats. The library is just simply clicking on empty bookshelves to move them, and the looping hallway is a very clunky version of an old Super Mario 64 trick, a teleporter on the far end that leads back to the start. The puzzle is supposed to be walking back through it to reveal the first switch that allows entry to the second, although monkeying around the door frame just spazzes the segment out and skips the middle switch, effectively bypassing the tedium of walking through the hallway several times. One element that becomes immediately apparent is the awkward theming around smoke. Smoke fills sections of the library and hallway and causes coughing to pass through, which comprises the only thing going on the first level at all. The body horror stuff is basically reserved for the latter 2 levels. The second level is comprised of another 2 puzzles, a basic light switch puzzle where interacting with switches will light or unlight a series of lights and the player needs to work out the correct combination. It's sad when the Saw games had a more novel twist on this overdone concept. Meanwhile, the second puzzle is more difficult to describe as such. The morgue has 4 doors, one leads to the switch while the other 3 lead to a evil mouth. These doors are randomized playthrough to playthrough, and what puzzle is here is unclear to me. Looking into the doors, the one that heads downward is the one that progresses the game, but I'm not sure how you're supposed to intuit that on your first playthrough. An old-style 8mm camera runs footage in the room that seems to be of no consequence to the actual solution that's supposed to be here, so the player's either meant to just guess and check, or cheese the puzzle with foreknowledge of how it works. The third and final level also throws any amount of puzzle solving into the trash. It's a relatively large maze with a lot of dead ends. The game attempts to heighten the atmosphere, but in ways that don't really work. Tossing more body horror stuff at the end of every hallway has the same issue of a lack of impact. You see it coming 10 seconds before you get anywhere close to it, assuming you even bother and don't just turn around to get towards the actual exit. The game also plays high-intensity, quote-unquote, scary chase music. Nothing chases you, and you're free to dawdle as much as you want. Horror without threat is just a lot of noise. The shoe drops at the end and reveals what this game really is. In the good ending, you escape while everyone else gets lung cancer. One left.
Sorry, kid. One of your friends got out first.
Oh.
That means you'll be spending the rest of your life trapped, stuck in here with no way out. That's not even the worst part. Soon, you'll start changing. Tooth loss, lung disease, cancer.
Is this an
I wish I could say it
anti-smoking
isn't
game?
that bad, but it is.
Is that what this is?
I think this is literally... You're trapped, game over, just like...
Just
3 out of 5! It's anti-smoking!
What?
It's the real cost! It's the truth camp! This is an anti-smoking game!
If you fail to escape in 8 minutes, you die of lung cancer and nobody will ever love you. This game is a contrived Xbox One exclusive, boring 20-minute long anti-smoking PSA developed in partnership with The Real Cost, an advertising campaign devised by the United States Food and Drug Administration. I don't like the government doing this. It's weird, isn't it? Commissioning a bad horror game through Microsoft. Yeah, smoking is bad, we know, but why are you telling me through a poorly thought out and made walking simulator? It's not that you could never make an anti-smoking game. Lots of art is about things, including games. But this isn't a game made as an exploration of idea. It's a poorly thought out ad campaign hidden in a bad game for money laundering purposes, I'd assume. The game isn't that subtle about the smoking thing, but it's not until you clear it that its ties to the government are revealed, which is, in its own way, a little bit sinister. Consider that this was instead a terrible shooter, and when you beat it, it said, "Join the army." The messaging here is, I suppose, at least a positive one, but the FDA isn't exactly a great organization given their ties and bending to the whims of the pharmaceutical and pesticide industries for money. It's a very clumsy attempt at appealing to what was, in 2019, a dying fad with live cam horror game YouTubers and streamers screaming genre, made worse by how hard the horror flops. Also, I had nowhere else to put this, but one of the achievements in this game is for getting the good ending 20 times. Get it? Like 20 cigarettes in a pack? Even with a game this short, that's just mind-numbingly tedious for a game that features almost no gameplay and has static puzzles that never change. Even speedrunning the game, which takes about 2.5 minutes, you'd be running through this tiny little game for an entire hour. One Leaves is a true oddity. Every aspect of it, really, from being an asset flip freeware government campaign to its bizarre Xbox One exclusivity. The game fails at delivering any sort of horror atmosphere effectively, runs badly, and lacks any significant amount of gameplay to keep it from feeling like the most bottom-of-the-barrel, misguided, 27 cents on the Steam Summer Sale shovelware pile. Nothing about this game is appealing even before the realization that it's government propaganda, even if its heart is in the right place. Its freeware status and extremely short length make it more of a curiosity than anything else, and I guess for achievement hunters there's a very easy bunch. But man, is it one lame attempt at appealing to a very dead audience. It's quite possibly the worst game I've played for this channel yet, never coming together in gameplay, atmosphere, horror, or even message. It's really just a clumsy, misguided mess.
Close, but looks easy, right? Just turn on all the lights. Solve this one, and you get a congratulations. Right over there, in that flashlight. Yeah, it isn't $1 million, but it might come in handy. Welcome to the hospital.